Welcome! It's September, so it's time to take a look at what happened to the sun during the month of August. Now, spoiler alert, August was a fairly quiet month and most activity indicators were down, but that didn't stop the sun making significant progress towards solar maximum. Let's summarize what's going on the sun, particularly initially with sunspot number. The monthly average sunspot number was 115. That's down 28% from July. The smooth sunspot number, which applies to February of 2023, was 118, which is up 4% from the previous month, which means that solar cycle 25 has now overtaken solar cycle 24. And you can see a previous video that I did that talks exclusively about that. Here is the official sunspot record. The daily sunspot numbers are in yellow and are highly variable. The blue are the monthly averaged, and the red is the so-called smooth sunspot number, which is a 13-month average over the monthly values. On the end there you can see a couple of models, and we'll get a bit more into that in a little while. So how is solar cycle 25 doing? This is a plot of the data against the NOAA-NASA model that they produced in 2020. The red line is the model, the gray area is the uncertainty on that model, and the dark line with the diamonds on it is the actual sunspot data, the monthly sunspot data. Now you can see that the last month the sunspot number dropped significantly. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. But in the background there you can see this purple line. Maybe you can. So it's a little difficult. So I've over traced it and shown it with a darker line. So that's that there. That's the smooth sunspot number. And you can see it's well outperforming the model. And that's good through February of 2023. Here are some other sunspot number predictions. There's three methods used here, and this is from the Solar Influences Data Center in Belgium. On the left, we have the standard curve. Unfortunately, it goes a little bit off scale here, so it's difficult to tell actually what it's saying, but it's predicting maximum of something like about 190 in the sunspot number, and that maximum should occur in April of 2024. In the middle, we have what's called the combined method. That is the green line there, and it shows a maximum of over 140 sometime after August of 2024. On the right, we have something called the McNish-Lincoln method, which predicts a maximum of over 150. The curve is still going up in August of 2024, so presumably the maximum must be at that point or sometime after. So let's take a look at the smooth sunspot number in a little bit more detail. The blue curve here is solar cycle 24, smooth sunspot number, with a starting date of the minimum of solar cycle 24. The orange curve is the same thing for solar cycle 25, starting at its minimum date. So the curves should be equivalent to one another. You can see that solar cycle 25 is overtaking solar cycle 24 quite well. The end of that dash curve there is I've assumed that the current sunspot number, which is relatively low, will remain that way for several months. And if that occurs, then the peak of the sunspot number should be well over 140, maybe as high as 150. And the sunspot cycle will reach its peak in March of 2024. So there is a prediction, and a very conservative one. So continuing our summary, we're going to take a look at actual events. And one of the things that is measured are the number of sunspot regions that come on the sun. These are numbered by NOAA. There were 27 new sunspot regions on the sun this last month, and that is exactly the same as the previous month, so there's no real change there. This is that data represented graphically. Orange is solar cycle 25, blue is solar cycle 24, and since the first year, solar cycle 25 has been outperforming solar cycle 24, and by an increasing margin. And so far, we've had 105 more major regions in solar cycle 25 than there were in solar cycle 24. Next, we'll take a look at C flares. Last month, there was 184 C flares. That's 34% down from July. Again, here's a graph of that. Orange, once again, is 25, blue is 24. And you can see that the solar cycle 25 is producing twice as many C flares as solar cycle 24. And that margin is being maintained, if not widened, as time goes by. We can do a similar sort of analysis for M flares. Last month we had 24. That was down from 48 the previous month, so that's a 50% drop. Even so, solar cycle 25 is widening the gap between it and solar cycle 24 as far as M flares are concerned, as you can see from this graph here. The most exciting solar flares are X flares. The trouble is there's not very many of them, so it's difficult to do a number comparison. But in last month, we had 2 X flares, which is quite a large number, and that's a 100% increase over the previous month, which only had 1. But these statistics are small numbers, so hard to read too much into them. Here are the X flared numbers represented graphically. And you can see we've already reached 20 X flares so far this cycle. We'd have to wait a whole year without another X flare before solar cycle 24 can equal the number that is in solar cycle 25. Lastly, but no means leastly, we'll take a look at coronal mass ejections. There are 158 CMEs monitored last month. That's a drop of 28% from the previous month. But yet again, the number compared with solar cycle 24 is increasing. So let's take a look at that. Here you can see that there are significantly more coronal mass ejections in solar cycle 25 than 24, something like about 30%. And that difference is widening as time goes by. So solar cycle 25 is still growing rapidly, whereas solar cycle 24 was beginning to ease off at this point. Now, what if these activity parameters, flares and coronal mass ejections and such like, were a measure of how big the cycle is going to be? We can actually predict how big the cycle would be based on that. If we did it on sunspot regions, the peak would be about 140. C flares, 220. M flares, about 235. X flares, 166. And CMEs, 150. If you average all those out, it's predicting that the solar cycle will be about 182 at maximum. I have created a parameter which I call flare power. It multiplies the value of the flares by a certain number and then adds them together to give a flare power. C flares don't count, so they've got a 0 multiplier. M flares are multiplied by 1. X flares are multiplied by 10. And then I've smoothed the data over a single rotation of the sun, or 28 days. And you can see that the flare activity comes in bursts, approximately separated by 90 to 100 days. That would say we'd be due for another burst in about 90 days' time, or the middle of October. Note this curve, the best fit curve here, is still rising at the end of the curve. So it implies that we're still going up the solar cycle, and there's more to come. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this? In all activity parameters, solar cycle 25 has exceeded solar cycle 24 so far. We're due another activity burst in October, so this quiet period is not unexpected. It implies a higher maximum, sunspots somewhere between 140 and 190, flares and CMEs about 180 plus or minus 40. And you remember my prediction in 2020 was 165 plus or minus 30, which doesn't look too bad at the moment. As far as the maximum date is concerned, we're getting quite a range of values still, anything from March of 2024 to June of 2025. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. So thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe and goodbye.